Tile drafting games are often a bit like multiplayer solitaire, but what if you added some player interaction? I'm Dr. Brian McDonald, this is Brains on Games. Let's talk about Ink from Final Score Games. Ink was published by Final Score Games, but it's distributed by Asmodee. That's how I got my hands on this review copy, and this is a great looking game. Ink is light. It's kind of at the higher end of light in terms of its complexity. This is one that plays with 2 to 4 players. Kids aged 8 and up can figure this one out. The box says games last about 30 to 45 minutes, but we found it was closer to 45 minutes to an hour, at least when we played, just because maybe we had some thinkers around the table. Like I said, we are talking about a tile drafting game where you're trying to create areas of color in order to activate some abilities. You can create some combos here, and Final Score has added some bonus actions that create a bit of player interaction. There's a couple of take that actions that can be added to the game, but you're not guaranteed to add those actions every single time. I say that because you've got this board of bonus actions, and it's a dual layer board where you're drawing actions at random and placing them into the board. Now, I mean, you can tweak that a little bit and choose the actions that you want. They do have colored backs, so you're meant to take 2 reds and 2 blues. Some of these allow you to add an extra tile to your tableau or to move ink bottles around on your tableau, which is fantastic, to remove bottles from your tableau. Those are all things that are great, but the ones that add some interaction are the ones that allow you to take one of your bottles and put it around the wheel where you're drafting from, or to force your opponents to draw a tile from a bag that's going to block spaces in their tableaus. What you're trying to do in Ink is be the first player to get rid of your ink bottles. Each player at the start of the game is going to be drawing at random and getting this little palette that's going to sit next to their player area. These ones are assigned to either of those 2 particular colors, and then you've got a dozen bottles that are joker bottles, and these can go anywhere on your tableau. Turns are very simple. If you choose to pass your turn, if you don't want to take any tiles and add them to your tableau, you can pass. That allows you to move 2 of your ink bottles from your little palette over to the joker side, meaning that these are now wild and they're going to be easier to place in your tableau. Most of the time though, you're going to be drafting. You're going to take this is called your lead bottle, you're going to take that bottle and you're going to move it somewhere around this wheel that's going to be in the middle of the table. You'll grab the tile from that part of the wheel, you'll place it into your tableau, it just has to touch one of the existing tiles that are already there, and you're trying to create large groups with the same color in them. Once you've drafted, you immediately take another tile from the bag and you place that one back around, and then the next player gets to go. One of the things that makes the drafting portion of the game quite strategic, I think, is that you can move your bottle as far as you want, but if you want to get past, you're always going clockwise, if you want to get past your starting space here, well, you have to pause and then you have to draw from a bag. So I'm trying to create this big yellow area, say, and maybe I'm going to want this tile next. So I can get that, but I can't move backwards. I'm going to have to go all the way around the circle. Then I have to stop. I have to draw from this X bag. Now at the beginning of the game, there are going to be a limited number of single X's in here. I draw one of these single X's, and that's going to go somewhere on the board, blocking a space with a color that matches the color on the X. So I'm breaking up these areas of color when I'm choosing these tiles. Like I said, there's a limited number of tiles at the start. 3 per player are dropped into that bag. Once those run out, you're going to fill them up with double X tiles. And if you draw one of these, you have to cover 2 tiles of the same color. But like I said, those ones, the double X ones, are not going to come out until later in the game. So you've got a limited number of the single X tiles. They just have to cover 1 tile of the same color, and then you can continue your move until you grab the piece that you wanted. Now, it's unlikely I'd be able to wind up with a tableau like this, because the other players are going to see that I'm collecting yellow. They're going to want yellow spaces as well. If I were able to get this big group like this, well, then I can start to place some ink bottles and take some bonus actions. You're not required to do this. You can set up a big group so that you can get these combos, but eventually you're going to be starting to place these things from your board into your tableau. The tricky part is that the ink bottles do block off spaces in your tableau, so you're not going to be able to get those groups the way that you might want to because of the blocked spots. So I might be able to do this. If I decide that I want to take this 6 bonus action, I'm going to cover up the 6. You put your jar upside down to show that you've got that bonus action on the go. You place your ink jars on only the spots in your tableau that are white. Those are all going to get covered up, and then I have the option to take this action. In this case, the 6 bonus action is that I can remove 2 ink bottles from 2 different colored areas. Now, I don't have ink bottles on different colored areas, but I probably would by the time I got this big space set up. So I've placed my ink jars here. I've covered up all the white spots. I've covered my combo tile, but I still have one other number in that big area, and this area is still large enough to fulfill that bonus action. So I could take one more ink jar, put that upside down on the 4, and then take this action, which is to move one tile from the edge of my painting somewhere else. Again, you're trying to create those large groups and maybe get those ink jars out of the way so that they're not interfering with your plans. I might even move something like this so that I'm keeping my big area of yellow, but now I've got this big orange area, and if I could find some bonus points for orange, then I'm going to be able to get some more ink jars off of my palette. And that's really the game. Play continues until one player has gotten rid of all of their ink jars. If they manage on their turn to get rid of more than the 24 that they have, there are some black ink jars, and these are kind of the tiebreakers. So if 2 players in the same round manage to clear their board, the one with the most black ink in their tableau is going to win. This just means that if you don't have enough to fill the spaces on your final turn, you're going to add some of these to your tableau instead. But the reason why 2 players might win in the same round is that you have to have the equal number of turns. So you play things out. Once one player gets rid of all of their ink jars, you play things out until everyone's had the equal number of turns. So 2 people might be able to go out on the same round. What skills, though, are you practicing when you play ink? Very clearly, this is a game involving spatial planning and spatial reasoning. You've got to figure out which tiles are going to allow you to create those large groups that you want so that you can place as many of these ink jars as possible into your tableau. That involves some visual analysis, but also some mental rotation skills, because you're not picking each of these up and turning them around necessarily to see how they're going to fit. You know that you've got the reverse side where the colors are sort of opposite, and then you can spin those things around once you've grabbed them. But every once in a while we would find ourselves with a tile where we thought, oh, I thought that this would fit that way, and it didn't quite do that once I picked it up from around the circle in the middle. Final thoughts, though, about ink. Well, I mean, first of all, the components here are gorgeous. I like the kind of varying shades of the different colors here that you're getting, and the ink jars are really, I mean, they do add something. If we were just talking about flat plastic or cardboard pictures of ink jars, I mean, the game would not look as good on the table. This is a game that has great table presence, I think, with these little jars. They are translucent, which is nice, so the light shines through them. They do look great. You've got the replayability too, because you've got the different, and that you could assign them randomly, but you've got the different tiles for the bonus actions, and you're dealing out at random your color palettes here. And you are kind of weighing that decision of, well, I really want to get this tile, but do I want to go all the way around and then have to draw an X from the bag that's going to block off at random? You don't know what color you're going to get. It's going to block off some part of your tableau and interfere with your ability to move forward in terms of your plans, the big groups that you're trying to create on these boards. the timing of that is important too, because eventually you're going to run out of those single X's and then you're blocking off two spaces of the same color, and that is really bad. One of the things that really was a pain for players, especially when we were playing with the each opponent draws an X from the bag goal, when that would happen, you'd get, oh, if you got the wrong one, what a pain it was. And if you couldn't put it anywhere else, if you had to put it so that it was covering up a space that already had an ink jar on it, those ink jars go back into your storage space, and now you've got more that you have to get out on the board. So you're really taking a step backwards. And then you've got that interaction, which is maybe less common in these kinds of tile drafting games where you're creating a tableau on your side of the board. Each person's making their own tableau. Most of these games, you're not really interacting with the other player's cards or tiles that they're placing. But here you can do that. It's optional though, which is also interesting. You don't have to include, there's only two that really interfere somehow with the other player's plans, and those are each opponent draws an X from the bag. That's brutal when it happens, but it's always going to be hard to do that because it's going to be near the bottom of the stack. The other one is, I didn't really talk about this too much, but you can place one of your ink bottles onto a spot around the wheel in the center of the table, and that's great too, because not only are you getting rid of one of your ink bottles, but you're also, if somebody takes this tile, the ink bottle stays on there, so it's blocking up a white space so that they can't place their ink on it. If they need those colors to get the group, that's going to be one fewer bottle that they're going to be able to take off and put onto their tableau. So some satisfying combos, some somewhat thinky tile laying, but it's not too complicated. Very easy to understand. Draft a tile, place it, take the bonus action, or pass, and then move some of your ink jars over from your palette to the Joker stack. I think there's some replayability there, and the game does look great. Like I said, are there downsides? I mean, well, there's the randomness, right? That might interfere with your plans because you're drawing these tiles from a bag to replace the ones that you're taking from the board. So that's one thing. You never know. It is a risk to draw from the X bag because you never know what color you're going to get. And if it's the wrong color, it might really mess up what you hope to be able to do that turn and completely change things around. There is some interaction there, but it is limited. So if you're really hoping for a lot of take that and back and forth, there can be a little bit of that, but that's not the focus of the game, and there's not so much of it. So it's a little bit of an add, but it's optional too, and the interaction is kind of mild, I would say, if you want to call it that. The other thing, this was probably the biggest complaint from the groups of players around the table, is that I mean, they've got these purple jars, they've got all these different color jars, light blue and these reds, but the red and orange, they kind of look different when you hold them up like this, but when they're on the table, you had to look closely to be sure which was which. Now, that doesn't matter when you're just placing things on your tableau, but when we're talking about moving the two colors around the table, it is a little bit harder to tell the difference between them. So maybe it was the lighting in our room, but that was the one thing, the one component choice that kind of made us say, I don't know if that's really the best combination of player colors for the game. Maybe we needed some green ink on there. They do have a little bag of counters that are not translucent, and it's certainly much easier to tell the difference between these two colors than it is to tell the difference between the two jars when they're on the table. So you might use these instead if you wanted to really be sure what was what. But let's be honest, these pieces are really cool, and you kind of want to be using those instead of just these solid circles. And that is Ink, a great looking tile laying game with nice components and a little bit of player interaction, which, like I said, I think is unusual in these kinds of games. Thanks so much to the folks at Asmodee for sending this one my way. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them in the comments section below the video, or you can email me at brian@brainsongames.ca. brainsongames.ca is the website. That's where future episodes will go. Previous ones are already up there. Brains on Games is the X handle and the Facebook page and the Instagram feed and the Blue Sky feed. We're all over the place. And if you enjoyed this video, you want to be notified of future ones, you can head on over to YouTube and click that subscribe button. Thanks for joining me, and hopefully I'll see you next time.